Hey y'all, Father Jim Haney from St. Paul's in the Plains in Lubbock. I have stopped in scenic Archer City. I was on the way home from Fort Worth to Lubbock and took the 10-mile detour. Just a little while ago, a few months ago, I rewatched the classic 1971 film The Last Picture Show, which was filmed here. Right over my shoulder is the theater where The Last Picture Show was shown in the Last Picture Show movie. And if you see this area over here, this was hugely important. Some very sad scenes towards the end of the movie took place in these buildings over here. The Last Picture Show is a wonderful film, and yet it is extremely dark and depressing at the same time. If you remember, the movie tracks the lives of kind of two sets of people in a small West Texas town. It was filmed in the early 70s, but it was set in the early 1950s. And it was dealing with the decline of that town and the tough lives people had navigating through that kind of decline. It tracked two groups, kind of a group of young high school kids who were about to graduate, kind of a coming-of-age movie for them. And it also tracked some middle-aged folks and how their lives intersected and how bleak their lives turned out to be. There's a lot of sex in the movie, but there's very little love. The sex is rather empty in The Last Picture Show. Folks don't have much of a purpose in their lives, it seems, in that movie. They just kind of go through life in a purposeless way, living their life but not really enjoying living their lives. They have life, but they're not truly living in the deepest sense of the word. There's a Roman Catholic priest and monk named Father Richard Rohr. He hails from Albuquerque, New Mexico. He writes a lot about the two different halves, the two different stages of adult life. He talks about the first stage being about establishing yourself, establishing your identity, perhaps marrying, establishing your career, building up some security, building up some nest egg, kind of in some ways building the wall, building the structure of what your adult life will be, finding things like success, finding things like security, finding material prosperity. But then he says there's a second half of life, and oftentimes we're ill-equipped in our culture to deal with that second half. The things that were extremely important in the first half become almost unimportant in the second half. And if we focus on those things, we will be shooting ourselves in the foot spiritually. Jesus talks about this. Jesus says those who would save their lives will lose it. Those who lose their lives for the sake of the gospel will find it. Jesus also says, don't worry about your life, what you'll wear, those kinds of things, what you'll eat. But seek first God's kingdom and God's righteousness, and the other things, God knows you need them, the other things will be added to you as well. In the second half of life, Father Rohr would suggest we need to focus on love, loving others, loving God, finding deeper spiritual communion with God, and laying aside the quest for things that were important in our younger lives but fade in importance as we grow older. As a parish priest, I often deal with folks at many stages of life. I do deal with folks at the end of life, and many of them cross the finish line in glorious ways, but there are some who are really sad to deal with. These folks are often focused on things. Either they are focused on accumulating things and finding that at the end of life, those things do not really bring them any joy or any satisfaction. Or they are focused on the loss of things that they used to have. They maybe used to have more money, more stuff, more space, more physical mobility, those kinds of things. And all they do is bemoan the loss of those kinds of things instead of living their lives for others, living their lives for God, living their lives for other people. It's a poignant lesson. It's the lesson of The Last Picture Show here in Archer City. It's a lesson that we would do well to heed. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And those two things become even more important as we get older, as we go into that second half of life. Richard Rohr says it's almost as if you climb a ladder to the top of the wall in the first half of life and you find out the ladder is set up against the wrong wall. and it's time to move the ladder and start seeking some other things as well. Nothing wrong with success, nothing wrong with security, but it is not the be-all, the end-all, the focus, the purpose of life. So with those thoughts from Archer City, Texas, I will leave you. God bless, and have a wonderful day.